Hi guys, and welcome back to RedStone Productions. Today we are reviewing the SA609 MkII, the new version on Stam Audio's take on the 33609 Diode Bridge compressor limiter. About 2 years ago, Stam Audio released their SA609, the MkI version, and that was modeled after the vintage or metal knob version of the 33609 that saw the light in the late 70s. It's supposed to be a little bit darker sounding compared to the newest iteration of the 33609, but I've always been extremely happy with it, and I always use it on drum basses, kick and snare, because it's also a dual mono unit. About 4 weeks ago, we had both Joshua van der Stam and Theo Pizzolante from Stam Audio, who took one of their prototypes of the 33609 MkII version, and we discussed the upgrades to the actual circuit. Let's hear what the buzz is all about from the manufacturer himself.
So, long story short, the first one is based on the metal knob. It was known for having this drop after 16K. It was a darker compressor than the current offerings.
That was the vintage version, yeah?
Yeah, the first one.
The very first one.
So we found some clients, as much as they love the unit, for certain modern productions were like saying like, oh, it would be cool if you could also have like a more modern sound to it. But we didn't want to lose what we already done, recreating, which was the hardest part, with discrete cards and using solder transformers, that nice top end drop. So with Theo, we decided to introduce both of them into one unit. So with this knob here, you can just change from the original metal knob to the most modern revision of the 33609.
Okay.
And what it does, it's the top end just comes up almost up to 20K.
Yes.
So it gives you a more hi-fi or more, modern sound to the unit, in line with what is being made originally these days.
Got it.
So the user now, through some clever circuit changes
that we cannot discuss,
now have two 33609s in one. So if you want to go vintage and a dark compressor on your mix bus or drum bus or kick and snare,
you go metal.
You go metal knob. If you want the modern sound, you just switch. And below that, we added a dry wet knob, which is a feature the first one didn't have.
No.
And I don't think any other unit has it that is currently being made. And that's really cool because, well, it's a blend control. And yeah, those are the two changes from the first one. Everything else is the same.
When it comes down to vintage designs, to me it's very important to look at the actual history of those circuits. In fact, in 1969, Rupert Neve was commissioned by the ABC television studios to build a compressor limiter that would replace the MkII Compressor cassettes housed in their own desks. These MkII compressors were very popular back in the days. In fact, they were used at the Olympic studios for all of the recording sessions of Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. But they only had one caveat: they were not so reliable, and this was pretty much unacceptable for broadcast operations. For this reason, Rupert Neve was given about 3 to 4 weeks to come up with a completely new compression topology. And he thought of actually using diodes to control the dynamics of the audio going through these units. This is a solid-state compressor limiter. It's actually including 3 transformers per channel, so we have a total of 6. If we look at the actual schematics themselves, we see the signal coming in. Let's take one of the 2 channels as an example, going through the first input step-down transformer. This is actually in charge of lowering the incoming level and also changing, of course, the relative impedance. Straight after the input transformer, we have our control element. That's where our diode bridges actually live. After this, we're actually going into the interstage transformer, which is in charge of unbalancing our signals. After that, the signal is going into our BA440 amplifying stage, which is then followed by our output transformer to balance the signal back outside. The sidechain of the compressor is taken before the BA440 amplifying stage. So that basically means that every time we make up for the gain we are losing when gain reduction is happening within the compressor, that is actually driving our sidechain of the limiter itself. Both these sidechains are then going back into our control element, who is in charge of doing the gain reduction. The gain reduction within these diode bridge compressors, it's happening thanks to the use of diodes themselves. Normally, if we think of diodes, we think of electrical components that let the current through over a specific value, below which no current is passed through. So in a way, we think of it as sort of an on-off switch. But in reality, things are a little bit different. If we draw a graph where we see plotted both current and voltage, and let's say we have a diode which has a value of 0.7, which basically means over 0.7 it will let all of the current through, and below that it will not, we can see at the very beginning, very far away from that threshold voltage value, no current will pass through. But the closer we get to that 0.7 volt value, some of the current will actually be going through in a very exponential manner till we actually go to that threshold value where all of the current will pass through. Now, Rupert Neve thought of actually using this exponential curve for controlling the gain reduction by always making sure that we were operating under a sweet spot of voltages so that the diodes could apply more or less gain reduction depending on how much voltage it was fed into them. If you want to go a little bit deeper into the actual circuit design, I strongly suggest to have a look at one of those really nice videos from do-it-yourself recording equipment that you can find on YouTube. It actually tears down one of the original 33609 and actually draws the schematics of these circuits. Rupert Neve actually thought of using some of the original building blocks of the line amplifiers found in their own consoles, and around that, with the integration of this control given by the diodes, he came up with the very first iteration of this diode bridge compressor limiter, the 2252, which went through several revisions, the 2253, 2254, and all of these designs were complete Class A designs. From the original 2252, 53 and 54 full Class A designs, in the mid-70s we finally saw a Class AB design from Neve of this diode bridge compressor, and that was the 2264. At one point in the late 70s, Geoff Tanner, who was working at Neve, was asked to actually house this compressor in a 19-inch rack. So that was the very first iteration of the 33609, and that was the vintage version as we refer to, or the metal knob version. After that, the 33609 saw other upgrades, if we can call it like that. We have the 33609C, that after a few years was discontinued, but then in Japan there was still a lot of demand of this product, so Neve released the 33609J for the Japanese market, even though it was not using discrete components anymore. And when the Japanese realized that, they actually started to ask for a discrete version of it, hence the revision JD, Japanese discrete. Nowadays, if you look at the AMS Neve lineup, we have the 33609N version, which is their attempt to go back to the original design, so the vintage version of it, of course with the use of SMD technology throughout. So no through-hole components anymore, but SMD. Now that we have a better understanding of the 33609 original circuit and history, it's time to actually run some audio through the unit and see what's the difference between the MkI version and the MkII version from Stam Audio.
The stern, the rudder, keel planks on the deck, frames inside the name that's written on my back. The entire hull was built with love for the deep blue sea below and the heaven above. Other keel planks on the deck, frames inside the name that's written on my back. The entire hull the color of your soul.
Jump out from the bed when the sun's right bright, just for the people living in the land of rice. No time to think, no time to decide. Let's down on the ground, let's start the fight. Should you change something, cause the life may be. Jump out from the bed when the sun's right bright, just for the people living in the land of rice. No time to think, no time to decide. Let's down on the ground, let's start the fight. Should you change something, cause the life may be. Jump out from the bed when the sun's right bright, just for the people living in the land of rice. No time to think, no time to decide. Let's down on the ground, let's start the fight. Should you change something, cause the life may be.
The stern, the rudder, keel planks on the deck, the frames inside, the name that's written on my back. The entire hull was built with love for the deep blue sea below and the heaven above. It's not your fault. The stern, the rudder, keel planks on the deck, the frames inside, the name that's written on my back. The entire hull was built with love for the deep blue sea below and the heaven above. It's not your fault. The stern, the rudder, keel planks on the deck, the frames inside, the name that's written on my back. The entire hull was built with love for the deep blue sea below and the heaven above. It's not your fault. Rain keeps falling on your lakey roof and you cannot sleep. And black is the color of your soul. Rain keeps falling on your lakey roof and you cannot sleep. And black is the color of your soul. Rain keeps falling on your lakey roof and you cannot sleep. and black is the color of your soul.
Now that we had a good listen to the unit, I can tell you that it's a no-brainer if you're going after those vintage tones when it comes down to drum sounds, guitar sounds, and even Masterbus, to be honest. I've seen the original 33609 being extensively used on broadcast vans for television. In fact, you have a dual mono compressor that you can strap it across your mix bus, and you can have your glue compression going on, plus a brick wall limiter that allows you to always be sure that you're never gonna go over a specific threshold. On top of that, it also doubles up as a great recording unit because it's a dual mono unit, so honestly I use it when tracking. For guitar, kick and snare, it's a no-brainer. Once I recorded those tracks, I actually strap it across the drum bus more often than other units. And again, also on the Masterbus, the ability to give you the modern and the vintage version allows you to kind of choose in between, I don't know, two different shades of the very same color, if I am allowed to say that. In fact, it stays the vintage version always on to my drum bus, and this MkII version I'm probably going to be positioning into my master chain because again, with the flick of a switch, it gives me the option of auditioning two very different revisions of the same compression topology. It sells for $19.90 US. It's available right now, so starting to ship from April 2023. That's what we got told from the manufacturer last month. And at this price point, honestly, it's a no-brainer. When it comes down to alternatives on the market, of course, there are several, starting from the original MkII 33609 version N, so the newer version, as we call it nowadays, which sells for about $4K, including VAT. There's also the nicely priced Heritage Audio clone of it, the HA609, which sells for about $1,800 US, including VAT. To be noted, this is not a one-to-one clone of the 33609, since it's a Class A design and not a Class AB as the original, so keep that in mind. I've never really used any of those units, but I've been told by clients and colleagues that the tone is pretty much there, but the component quality is not top-notch. All of the switches are not feeling great, and also the use of an external power supply, the way they did it, it doesn't seem to be the best possible option in terms of quality. So there are quite some options, but at this price point, with the quality components you find in those, think that these units have 6 Carnhill and solder transformers into it. And if you just do the math, those transformers, 6 of them, and all of the Gray Hill and Elma switches you find on the front panel, it's a no-brainer. I hope you guys enjoyed. Until the next time.